Ladies and gentlemen, in the 17 years I've been in the bike industry, one of the biggest things that gets asked is what to upgrade on my mountain bike. There is obviously an endless array of choices and things you can do to any mountain bike out there. And in this video, we're gonna try to demystify that entire topic. We're gonna talk about important things to know before you spend any money upgrading your bike whatsoever. Then we're gonna talk about the best and most common upgrades to hopefully any possible bike, depending on its different price points and how modern or old it is. And yeah, let's get into it. I'm confident this video is going to be valuable no matter how long you've been riding mountain bikes or been in the bike industry, and it'll also be hopefully comical. So to talk about something comical, compatibility. I also spelled that so wrong on the whiteboard right there. Just about everyone in the bike world knows compatibility is a massive issue. So mountain bikes over the years, as engineers have wanted to make them better and better and better, they've just had no choice but to change things like axle sizes and headsets and bottom brackets and brake adapters and bar diameters and seat post diameters and all these different things, because as they've engineered all of these products and the entire bike to work better as a holistic unit, they've just had no choice but to change these things. So what's become a standard, then all of a sudden is not a standard not long after. So compatibility is a massive issue, and that's kind of the biggest annoyance to upgrading your bike, is doing your research, digging around, finding a reliable, trustworthy source where you can contact people or real bike nerds that can actually help you find the right stuff, and then buying the upgrade and then making sure it fits before you totally install it and get it all dinged up and greasy and scratched, because then you might not be able to return it if it doesn't fit. So be fair warned, compatibility is a huge issue in this industry. It's even worse with older bikes, but it still totally exists with newer bikes, and that's just part of the game when it comes to upgrading your bike. The next thing is diminishing returns. So diminishing returns, this kind of really just applies now for what I would say bikes that are about $5,000 and above. So once you get a modern bike, let's say in the last few years, and it costs $5,000 and above, what you can do to that to upgrade it that actually is noticeable is pretty small. Bikes nowadays that are in that price range are just really damn nice and work really, really good. You could buy a bike, 10 years ago for 8 grand, and there would be a number of things you could still find to complain about or that didn't work well. And when, the new widget came out, you had to have it. Nowadays, it's not so much like that. I always like to say we've hit a bit of a product innovation plateau in the bike industry. I might be wrong about that, but currently I'm still right, at least in the last few years. Nothing has really come out that I would consider a wow factor in terms of improving the ride experience. Sure, there's little things like SRAM access electronic shifting. Yeah, it's better, but like, my existing SRAM Eagle still shift buttery smooth and absolutely perfect prior to that. No, it wasn't electronic, but still worked perfect. So I think there's diminishing returns in a lot of upgrades these days, especially on a bike that's $5,000 plus. However, if your bike is under $5,000, there's a ton of upgrades you can do to it that are gonna make a very significant difference to make the thing just ride better. Then let's talk about the methodology behind upgrading your bike. What do you want to do to it first? That's sort of the big question that everyone has. I break this down into 2 different things. The first thing is fix annoyances. So that's going to be harder or easier to point out the more experienced of a rider you are and the more of a bike nerd you are. If you've been riding for several years and you know a lot about bikes and you've worked on them and you know the other things that are available, you're going to see a bike and immediately know what you just do not like and look at it and be like, oh, no, I'm not riding that, I'm not doing this. Well, it'd be like this.
Yo, Adam, it's cool if I borrow your bike for a little bit?
Yeah, no problem. It's in the back, go grab it.
All right, sweet. Level brakes? EXO tires? Are those SPD pedals? And that stem, is that a 50 mil stem? No.
Beyond fixing annoyances, so just fix what bothers you, what you know you need to change. Then it comes to the most noticeable thing, right? That's where I think it's important to upgrade stuff. And there's, of course, different price points in that. So most noticeable could be tires, depending on what tires you currently have. It could be adding a dropper post to your bike if you don't currently have a dropper post. Those things are sort of mind-blowing, very big. When you go from tires that have no traction to tires that have immense traction, your ride experience dramatically changes for the better, and it's a lot of fun and puts a huge smile on your face, and that's why we ride mountain bikes and spend money upgrading them to begin with. So go with the most notable stuff. What that is very situational. Every bike is different, every rider has different preferences, and that's what we're gonna dive into next, is breaking down bicycles from older, newer, different price points, and what are some of the most common and popular upgrades that people get after that are fixing annoyances or most noticeable. So let's dive into that. Okay, most common and most popular upgrades. This is a very hard thing to dissect, and I do believe that the thought process you should go into this is fixing annoyances first. So if you have a great bike and everything's seemingly working well, but you have really bad traction, then tires are probably gonna be the most noticeable and valuable upgrade to go with. Or if your traction is good, but your hands fatigue every time you ride, then maybe a different pair of grips is gonna be really noticeable. So it definitely depends on your bike, and it's always entirely situational. I've structured a list that we will go through that I'm kind of gonna lead into starting out with upgrades that are more relevant for bikes probably under $2,500, and then slowly meander the direction of really expensive bikes and how you can continue to fancy up your bike even if it's already extremely nice. So one of the most impactful things possibly you could ever do to a mountain bike is a dropper post. And if you don't already know what that is, you need one, but everyone watching this channel probably already does. It definitely revolutionizes your riding from not having one to having one. There's obviously a bunch of different kinds out there, so if you do have one already, you might consider getting a more reliable one or a longer travel dropper post or even a fancier dropper post remote. So that's dropper post. Next up is tires. Tires, that's huge. That's like how you touch the ground, and we have made a massive amount of videos on tires. We have an entire playlist about it, so check that out. We've tried to do our best to demystify all of the endless options of tires out there, and also try to educate you on sort of the thought process going into tires, right? So if you want your bike to roll faster and be lighter and more nimble, go with a lighter weight tire that's a different size or a different tread pattern. If you're just really aiming for traction and you're not really concerned about rolling resistance and weight and that sort of stuff, go for grippier tires. So that's definitely a huge thing that will change the feeling of any bike. I mean, you put even one, but especially two different tires on a bike that are different than what's on there, and it'll completely change how that thing feels and rides on the trail. Beyond tires is tubeless. So depending on if your bike has tubeless or not, that makes a huge difference. Tubeless is great. The one problem that I think this would be the wow revolutionary thing if it did happen in the mountain bike world right now, but flat tires are still a problem. Oh. Tubeless definitely really helps with that, and it makes the tires feel different, and it makes the whole system much lighter and more reliable. Tubeless is a great thing to do. You do obviously need to make your rims compatible and have compatible tires, but tubeless is a killer upgrade if you don't already have it on your bike. I would love to see flat tires be history, but I don't know if that will ever happen, so fingers crossed on that. Speaking of tubeless, another thing, if you already are tubeless,
Today, Junior?
if you are already tubeless, take a look at tire inserts. So if you are dinging rims and you're already tubeless and you're just kind of running already pretty aggressive tires, tire inserts are a big thing. Cushcore makes a great product that basically wraps around your rim. It is not the easiest to install, but it can make it so you can get away with even lower pressure and not destroy your rims or tires. Pretty cool system, so definitely check that out. Pedals. So pedals, most bikes, at least anything remotely nice, doesn't come with pedals. Bikes don't come with pedals because they are so personal preference. Some people like the Shimano SPD, some people like the Crank Brothers style clipless pedal, other people ride flats, and there's a million different types of pedals, but that contact point, how your feet are stuck to your bike is another major thing to upgrade. So if you're not having any good traction on your shoes to your pedals, different shoes, or both can make a major difference to how that bike rides and how comfortable you feel on it. And again, upgrades are about smiling and having fun on the bike, but that also does go hand in hand with feeling more comfortable on the bike. So the more comfortable you can feel with your body position, your contact points, your traction, your grippiness of your shoes on your pedals, that's gonna make your ride experience better and you have more fun, which is why we do this once again. Next up is cockpit in general. So this is handlebars, grips, and stem. Wider bars can be a great upgrade depending on what your bike currently has, or maybe narrower bars. How wide your bars should be is covered extensively by us on YouTube and a bunch of other channels, so check that out. But wide bars can be a big upgrade if you're riding really skinny bars right now, and bikes historically, older bikes came with a lot skinnier bars until everyone kind of realized that wider bars give you a lot more control and stability on the bike, and especially shortening up that stem made the whole steering and control process just way better. So properly spec'd handlebars to the right width and a good stem length that may not be too long for you can really change how that bike feels and handles and can be a great upgrade. Then grips, of course. Grips are another one of those major contact points. And I really look at grips as like fixing annoyances, right? So if you just don't like the feel of your grips, or they give your hands a rash, or you get hand fatigue,
my fingers hurt.
That's when you want to go play around with the million different types of grips out there. There's a ton of good ones. We've once again made extensive videos on grips. Saddle, also known as a seat. We've made a bunch of videos about that, but that probably fell into the category much earlier in your head of if you have butt problems, get a different saddle, try out different ones. We made a video all about how to pick the right saddle, where we went into pretty good detail about things you should consider and really get nerdy about it. And I really think it's more of an important choice if you are having sensitivity issues down there, or if you're riding your bike 10 plus hours a week. That's when you really need to make sure you have proper circulation and a good saddle, but there's an important one right there. Brakes, once again, if it's an annoyance, if your brakes don't feel very powerful and you feel like you're having consistency issues with them or anything like that, larger rotors can instantly make your brakes more powerful, which is really nice. Definitely some compatibility weird stuff going on there because you're gonna need new brake adapters to move that caliper over to accommodate for the larger rotor, or just new brakes entirely. There's a ton of different options out there, from sort of lightweight 2-piston cross-country style brakes to 4-piston downhill style brakes. A big trendy thing these days is people putting more or less downhill brakes like Shimano Saints or what it would be the SRAM codes on their enduro and trail bikes, just because they really like how much power that has and the control they get from like sort of overdoing it with brakes. But brakes are huge. Obviously, if you're riding in steep terrain and you want to feel comfortable and confident in your braking power, brakes can be a major upgrade. The next thing I'm going to talk about, I think when you get to drivetrain, wheels, and suspension, it's all very blurs itself into sort of what you already have. But a quick little tidbit that's an interesting upgrade is your hub. So hub engagement. And a lot of people ride DT Swiss hubs, and there is a product that has been flying off our shelves for I think 5 years now, and it's a 54-tooth ratchet kit that fits several different common DT Swiss hubs. A whole video on that, link below and to that product page. But hub engagement. So in that video, we kind of explain what that does, right? So most bikes out of the box will come with a hub that doesn't have very much engagement. And where you notice that is when you come out of a corner and you go to pedal, there's this dead zone before it actually engages your drivetrain and starts propelling you forward. And that also happens in technical climbing. So if you're climbing technical rocks, you need to take a quick back pedal and then pedal forward again, or when you stop pedaling and then pedal again. That dead zone before it engages, a lot of times a novice rider would never notice that, but the second you ride something like an Industry 9 wheel set that has an insane amount of hub engagement and it's just instantaneous power the second you move your leg forward, you get used to that and then you pretty much can't go back. So for me, that's one of my own personal bike snobbery things is when I ride a different bike, if it doesn't have good engagement in the hub, and in my opinion, good is 50 points of engagement and up. If it doesn't have that, it bothers me. I just really hate the dead zone, the lag before it engages, and the sound that makes, and the feeling, and the wasted energy, and it just really is a pet peeve of mine. So hub engagement is huge, and it can be a pretty cheap thing to upgrade in some cases. DT Swiss obviously has hubs that a lot of bikes have on there right now with 18-point engagements, and you can just get that, I think it's $115 for the ratchet kit, and instantly have a totally different feeling bike and a great upgrade for just over $100. Beyond that, entire new wheels, right? Carbon wheels have a whole different thing. There's a ton of videos on there, but wheels can really lighten up a bike depending on how heavy your wheels are and how quality they are. That can make a huge difference. Carbon wheels have some really cool stiffness advantages to them that feel really nice, but also have some potential disadvantages depending on if you're the type of rider that dings rims all the time versus not dings rims. So carbon wheels, another huge upgrade. And then drivetrain and suspension. Those are extremely common on, I would say, like mid-range to higher end bikes. And drivetrain got really popular for sort of the older bikes, because a lot of older bikes still had a front derailleur. And if you had a 3x9 or 2x10 system, or even 2x11, front derailleurs are just dead. They're a complete thing of the past, and the big rings in the drivetrain game, SRAM and Shimano, have had one-by drivetrains for several years now, with a big, wide-range 12-speed cassette in the back and a single ring in the front. It gives you a huge range of gear, that more than you would probably ever need. That's an awesome thing to upgrade if you don't already have a good 1x12 drivetrain. And if you do have a good 1x12 drivetrain, and you just want to lighten it up or fancy it up and make it copper or gold or oil slick, that can be an upgrade. But that probably falls in diminishing returns, because if you look at something like Shimano SLX versus XTR, or SRAM GX versus XX1, they all shift amazing and really great. The only difference is really going to be aesthetics and like tiny little bits of feel and stuff like that. We have extensive videos comparing all of things, so you can kind of get a better idea of what the difference is if you're looking at upgrading your drivetrain. Suspension is a complicated one, because you can throw on an entire new fork or shock and make a huge difference. You could also potentially just tune your suspension better. You could spend time with something like a Cork Shock Whiz to figure out how to learn suspension, learning rebound and what tokens do and what air springs do, and maybe potential damper upgrades. Learning suspension, I think, is always a better thing to do before you just go dump money on upgrading it, because suspension is very expensive. But high-end suspension is amazing. And talking about diminishing returns, once you get to the very pinnacle of suspension, you can really push it further with the nice stuff, which often just looks fancier, has sort of a crazy amount of adjustment that more people may or may not actually need. You can get custom tuned suspension just for yourself. Push Industries is a really cool company to look into that does really, really fancy stuff with suspension upgrades and their own like extremely high-end rear shock, the 11.6. And I think that covers just about every possible thing you could do. Once again, you know, what we do here as a company, we have a bunch of bike nerds on staff all day, every day, that talk about this stuff, help people through this process of upgrading their bike and figuring out what's bothering them, what's good, what you should spend your money next. But at the end of the day, it is really fun to spend money on bikes. Lastly, I would like to close out with older bikes. I would like to caution you on, if you have a bike that is maybe I would say more than 7 years old, be careful of what you upgrade, because there's so many weird compatibility things, and you're kind of beating a dead horse at that point, for lack of a better analogy. But it's a little bit dangerous to be putting a lot of money into an old bike when some of those upgrades may or may not transfer over to a new bike, or it might make sense to just ride it as is and have fun with it and save up a few $1,000s and then just buy an entire new bike that has more modern standards. So hopefully that helped you guys out. Hit the subscribe button, that share button, that thumbs up button, and see you later.